Coming up on this week's episode of Check Your Balances, we talk about how difficult it is to have the basic 101 level discussions around personal finance. Stick around, that's coming up next.
Check Your Balances is a show produced and owned by Craftwork Capital. The views expressed by the hosts and their guests are personal opinions and should not be considered personal financial advice or the opinion of Craftwork Capital. All investments have risk and may lose money. Consult with your financial advisor, tax preparer, or attorney prior to implementing anything discussed, and please do not use this show as the sole basis for financial decisions.
Welcome back to another week of Check Your Balances. I am Ross Anderson, joined as always by my friend and co-host, Dan Maseka. Good to see you, bud.
Good to see you as well.
Rocking a Craftwork Capital t-shirt. I like it.
I like the shirt. This is like the first company purchase. Well, it wasn't a company purchase. This was a Ross purchase, I think, that I really appreciate. And it's been in my rotation ever since.
There was something about just having a t-shirt, because the Motley Fool did that for us. And like on your first day, the Motley Fool actually gave out like a big box of weird swag, including Nerf guns and all sorts of other stuff. And yeah, I was trying to recreate that slight bit of magic of having something with our logo and name on it. So yeah, I thought it was fun to get those t-shirts made.
So you've turned me into a total Silicon Valley mark. And all I could think of, Russ Hanneman, the crazy billionaire from the show, when he invests in Pied Piper, the little tech company, the first thing he wants is swag. And I think you two might share that personality trait. Not to the same severity, but there is an excitement about having like your logo on things that you can hand out to people.
I don't disagree. So I definitely like having that. I feel like I know you're not saying it to be mean, but that feels like a mean comparison just because he cares about that like above the product. I actually do want us to have a product that is thoughtful and that people care about. And I think we do. So hopefully my love of swag is not at the expense of doing good business and having an actual business to have swag for. To me, it was just like, hey, can we be excited about our brand?
Right. That's where you and Russ Hanneman diverge.
Yeah.
Is he's all about the swag, and you for you that's a compliment to the core product.
Correct. Yeah, I do want to actually be good at what we're doing. So because we're such good planners at this, we missed Financial Literacy Month, which is April.
Like the one thing that us as a financial podcast could have been on top of. But you know what? We did it probably the last couple of years, I think. So we've already done those episodes.
Well, we've done the episodes, and I think we need to do another because, first of all, to those of you that have been with us since the beginning, we very much appreciate you. But I know not everybody has been here since the beginning. I know not everybody is going to go back and listen to our full catalog. I certainly wouldn't if I were a consumer. I've never gone back and listened all the way through. We have had folks tell us they've done that. I'm always blown away. I'm so humbled by that. So if you have done that, thank you. But I don't expect people to do that. And so I think we need to hit some of the Financial Literacy Month topics. And our show normally, the way I describe it in terms of our content level, is like it's like a 200 level class. We're not normally doing the basics on this show. We tend to produce content for folks that are into personal finance. They like investing. They're trying to find the tips and tricks and trinkets that are going to up their game or take them to the next level from an investing perspective, where I do think we have to go back and hit the basics every now and then. And I wanted to hit the basics through the lens of some of the questions that we get that absolutely terrify me when I hear them. And not because they're bad questions. I think they come from a place of people wanting to learn. And one of my phrases is like, I want to know what the question behind the question is, right? And so a good example of this, and we can kick off and talk about any thread that comes out of it, but a good example of this is someone that essentially wants to say, I'd like to learn about investing. And what they will ask is, how do you buy this stock? Or what's the best stock to invest in? Right? That typically is how that presents for the first time. Or the other version of that is a theme that they've been thinking about. And there's a bunch of themes that have gotten super bubbly in pop culture. I think the marijuana stocks was one of them. I think AI has been a recent one, right? There's a bunch of kind of headline, how do I get involved in X sort of questions that when people ask that, to me, it's normally a, how do I invest? Somebody explained to me how this works, but it just presents a little bit differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that. It's also there's a little bit of FOMO with all the media that's hitting us from every angle now. You can be shown so many opportunities for making money, and people, whether truthfully or just for the internet, are saying they've gotten rich so fast by doing this one thing. People feel almost stupid for not doing that. And they're like, what am I doing wrong? How do I make the money from Bitcoin or AI or whatever it is? Someone's not telling me the thing. What is the thing?
I think we've also got the opposite happening right now. And last week on the show, Ryan kind of alluded to this with like the hustlepreneurs, which is kind of these Instagram influencers or TikTok people or whatever platform they end up on that just try to make making money sound so easy.
Right.
And you're like, oh, you're not doing the thing? How dumb of you to not be doing the thing that I'm doing. And I've seen that in so many iterations. And I hope that the people are making money that are doing that, but I think they're normally a little bit full of it. And so that makes people feel, I think, dumb for not being in the know or knowing the thing, or it just feels like the world is passing them by. And then, yeah, that's creating the FOMO that you're talking about.
Yeah. So I this specific situation that we've kind of created actually was presented to me a couple years ago with a person who was, I would call them middle-aged, but worked with a lot of younger people who were squarely in this like Robin Hood meme stock era. And hearing them talking about getting rich, making crazy money, or at least crazy returns up to that period on certain things. And they came to me, they're like, how do I do this? Like, what? So if someone came with that question, how do I buy X or how do I do X? How would you even start to address that with them?
For me, and it's because I'm a financial planner, I would try and zoom out. That my first question would always be to zoom out and be like, tell me more, right? Like, help me understand what you're trying to accomplish. Are you trying to just make a quick buck? Are you trying to improve your current investments? Are you already investing in anything? Because to me, I would have to try and relate it back to something that they're experienced in. And if they've never purchased a stock before, if they don't have a 401k, if they don't have any of those things, I would basically start there at let's talk about what investing is and why we invest in the first place, rather than try and explain just how you execute the transaction. But yeah, with people that don't have that history, so I will ask a couple pointed questions, and I've been in a version of this conversation very recently. I went through and basically said, well, have you ever invested before? And they said, no. I said, okay. Because I was being asked about basically how do you buy a stock or how do you get in on this trend? And I said, okay, well, the first thing that you need in order to kind of conduct one of these transactions is basically a broker. And that used to be a person, but now most of them are online. And I went through the kind of common household names, Fidelity and Charles Schwab, and that you hear the new ones like Robinhood and some of these other things that are out there. And of course, I'm me. So I was trying to keep the information limited and didn't go super beyond about like how we picked the best one. Because on your first purchase, it almost doesn't matter, aside from the fact that you're unlikely to change because of the inertia, right? And I clearly on our broker bonuses episode had a preference not for Robinhood, but that's just because I don't want people to get stuck there. If it's Robinhood versus don't invest, I'm like, I don't care. Just do the investing. And yeah, so I explained the mechanics of the transaction of this is how you would buy anything. And then I tried to transition into, but you have the choice of what to buy and talking about diversified ETFs and individual securities. So I kind of took it down that path of, let me answer your direct question, which is how do I buy a thing? And then let's talk about that you could buy many things. That was kind of my 2-step process towards answering that question.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting to relate it back to a thing that they may have already invested in, like you mentioned. I mean, it could be anything, but just from personal stories, I feel like most people have had like a savings bond as a kid or something, or maybe a parent open an account for you and put something in it, and you might have been an investor before, or even if it's a 401k, so can think along those lines to make it less foreign to you, even though investing in a brokerage account that you direct can be different.
Yeah. How many times have you run across this, Dan? People that say they're not investing, and then it turns out that they do have a 401k or a 403b or some sort of workplace retirement plan.
A lot.
Do people not think of that as an investment? Or is it just that people completely misunderstand what that is?
Yeah, I think people think of a 401k as a separate category almost, it must be. They're like, well, I have that. That's like my company retirement, but I'm not investing. Where when I was early in my career, I had so much trouble. I used to work at a bank, and people used to come and say, I want to open a Roth IRA, as if that were the thing that you bought. You invested in a Roth IRA, and trying to explain that was just a wrapper was very hard. Like, you are investing in all these different things. They're just falling under different umbrellas while you're investing. So I think some people get stuck in that world.
100%. And how many times have you met with somebody and they tell you about their Roth IRA, and then you find out it's like a bank CD Roth? Which many folks, if you're a teller at a bank and somebody says, I want to open a Roth IRA, a lot of them just put the paperwork across the counter. And quite frankly, that's probably what the manager at the bank wants too, which is, this is how you open one.
Yeah, I was probably the world's worst banker, because that was my first job. I was in the bank doing banking products, and people would come to me and be like, I want a Roth IRA. I would stop and try to explain to them that we can offer CDs in a Roth IRA or a money market in a Roth IRA, which were the only two tools I had at my disposal, but tried to explain to them what their options were within the world of Roth IRAs to make sure that I didn't just ignore them and put them in this. At the time, like, interest rates were abysmal, and I didn't want them stuck in a like 1% CD for 5 years.
So Dan, if you got the question, well, what is a 401k? Can you give us your 101 answer to that? What is your entry point of, I've never spoken about investing before, which is likely where that question is going to come from. What is a 401k?
Sure. I'll try my best.
I'm going to put you on the spot with like maybe the most basic question that we talk about every single day.
That's okay. So a 401k is a retirement plan sponsored by an employer where you can set money aside that can grow in a tax favorable way. Oftentimes that means being able to put money away that you can like reduce your tax burden with, or sometimes not, depending on what. Just, I've already gotten too complicated. But yeah, I would stop at the first sentence. It is a retirement plan sponsored by an employer that you can benefit from.
Yeah, even the most basic explanation of what it is, if you like actually try and listen to those words, and if I'm a fresh out of college kid that has never had one of these before and isn't into finance, I don't know that I would know what that means.
I think so. I just pulled up what it says on the IRS like FAQ, and it's even worse.
Did you do a better job than the IRS did?
Maybe. I don't know. A 401k is a feature of a qualified profit sharing plan that allows employees to contribute a portion of their wages to individual accounts.
I get why people don't know what this is. 401k is literally just the section of the tax code. That's why we call it that. It's not a special type of thing. It is a section 401k of the Internal Revenue Code. It's just the line in the code that defines what these are. And we talk about it as if it's a universal and ubiquitous instrument in retirement planning. And in many ways, it has become that.
For sure.
I think many people have access to either a 401k, or if you're in the government or nonprofit sector, a 403b, 457. Those,
I mean,
right.
Therein is also the complication. It's like, I have a 403b, sorry, not a 401k. So
yeah, everything you just said doesn't apply.
Right.
When they're almost identical. They're almost identical. Functionally, for the average person, like, are there some change? Yes. And so Like the people that have access to the 403B and a 457, they get to double dip. Yeah, there's all sorts of weird loopholes. But more than anything, all you need to understand is that you're going to pick a portion of your income and you're going to put it in this thing and you're going to park it there and try not to screw it up for the rest of your career.
So, sorry. Interesting that we're walking down this road. This also happened to me this week, and I'm sure I'm derailing our whole conversation here. But speaking of 401ks, the other thing I heard from someone this very week was, I'm not sure I want to contribute to my 401k because I'm worried about the stability of my employer. Like I'm scared that I don't want to contribute to the plan. That's a good one, actually.
That is a good one. It's your money. It's not their money, but that's not true if it's a top hat plan or if you've got like a deferred comp or something like that, which normally is going to be executive level jobs. But yeah, a deferred comp plan is not your money until they pay it out. It is a liability of the employer. So if you are scared on whether or not your job and company is going to be there, those are sometimes something you want to underfund. But a 401k is your money. That is not on the books of your company. The only portion that could be is the match if it's got a vesting schedule.
Right.
This is why this is so hard. And I hope we're not making this worse with this show. I think this is why it's such a difficult conversation, whether it's somebody's parent or grandparent or just somebody on their own trying to get educated about this stuff, that the language of it, which unfortunately matters, right? And I think language is such a fascinating thing. So Dan, do you think of saving and investing as different?
I do, but I don't think a lot of people do.
I actually think more people are with you. I use those terms almost as synonyms, and I realize that they're not. But when I talk about savings rate on our show, all I'm talking about is what portion of the income that you earn that you don't consume, right? That's the discipline part. Is the only thing you have to do, and I've said this in front of college kids, and I'm sure they groan when I say it, is that the only thing you have to do to create wealth in your life is spend less money than you're going to make. That's it. It's a simple thing. Now, there's many ways to optimize it. You can put it in pre-tax accounts or post-tax accounts or all sorts of other junk that we love to talk about on our show. But the only thing you have to do to create wealth is to generate more income or equity than you consume. That's it. Again, I think that probably gets groans, but whether you're putting money into your 401k, whether you're putting money into a savings account, whether you're putting money anywhere else, that's what you have to do to create wealth. There is an amount of savings that's probably too much. Once you get to that 3 to 6 months, or maybe more if you're on really lumpy income, we've talked about this a lot, but when you get to the kind of this comfortable cash cushion, you can stop. You don't have to keep saving into a savings account unless you're using that money on a recurring basis. But I still think of it as savings rate, because if I transition it into calling it an investing rate or some other even more ridiculous term, I'm convinced I'm going to lose even more people.
That's true. I'm very good at losing people.
But I think we've done it now. I'm not sure anybody's listened to our show at this point. They're like, why are they talking about the very first conversation everybody has in finance? But I think the very discussion we're having is why covering this topic is so difficult, because from the absolute jump, it gets complicated and we start trying to qualify our answer, right?
Right.
When all we're really trying to communicate is you're getting ready to earn money. Might be your first job. Let's take, for example, somebody that's going to make $50,000 a year, which may sound like absolute nothing or a ton of money, depending on who you are and what you do. If you're at 25 years old and you're going to work to 65 and you make $50,000 a year, you're going to make $2 million over your lifetime. That's without one raise. $2 million of income that you get to decide what to do with. And you've got things that you need to buy and consume and live on, and you're going to have to put some of it away, or at least you should be. That's so hard to tell somebody, because as soon as it becomes how, where, why, it becomes very personal. And then we all resort to rules of thumb, like try and save 15%, whatever, 3 to 6 months. And it gets into stuff that just starts making people's heads spin.
So I texted my brother this morning because I knew we were going to have this conversation, not to throw him under the bus, but he's one who often comes to me with like things related to personal finance. And I'm like, how did this happen? Like, why are you asking me this question? I will throw him under the bus. The one that I laughed at was when he first got a credit card and he thought he was paying his bill, but was actually taking cash advances from the credit card instead, which, I mean, obviously has negative repercussions. Thankfully, it wasn't going on for long. But that's why my mind went to him. I'm like, all right, if someone had basic questions about personal finance that we could address on the show, maybe he would be one of those people. He sent me a flurry of a couple, but one of them was like, when should we even think about talking to a financial planner? Because as we've discussed, there's a lot of complexity here, even in the most simple things. I don't know that a lot of people find their way to a financial planner for a long time. Like, we're talking with 50, 60, 70-year-olds every day who've never worked with anyone. At what point do you seek professional guidance? And what do you do until then?
Well, yeah. And I think there's a segment out there where they're good at this. And this is probably a lot of our audience, right? They are inclined to learn about personal finance because the answer is different for everybody. There are people that probably never work with an advisor because they think we're a scam, and they're fine, right? Like we are in some ways a luxury item. You do not need a person to tell you how to invest. You don't need a person to tell you how to strategically tax plan. You don't need a person to stress test your retirement and scenario model and do all of these things that we spend our day doing because, number one, we love it. We find value in it. We hope that we're delivering value to our clients. But a lot of what we do can be done on your own. I could say the same for the plumbing in your house, right? Like there's nothing stopping you from learning how to do basic plumbing work and change out your toilets and do whatever that work looks like. As a person that opened up my drain pipe one time to change a garbage disposal, I will never do it again. I know what that main pipe stack smells like. I will never open a mainline drain again in my life unless I have to. Doing that once was enough for me to go, yep, plumbers are incredibly valuable. This is not a thing that I need to do myself. And so, yeah, I think a lot of people perhaps make that judgment. I'm wandering a little bit, but I think this is also a reflection of our industry. Because I think our industry has made it tough for young people to get good advice, right? Like if the real advice was like, look, fill this thing out on your first day of work, because HR won't tell you what to do. If it's like, hey, fill this out this way and increase your 401k contribution every year by 1% until you hit 15, and then you're cool. That's probably what most people need. But yeah, it's really challenging because it's tough. It's tough to make that a good business on our side, and it's tough to make that attractive on the other side because it just feels boring. The loud voices on Instagram saying you're going to get rich if you do this thing are always going to be shinier than super boring but prudent advice.
The other tough thing is, right, we're in a world where there are fiduciaries and then there are salespeople. Like, if you're not seeking out a fiduciary, they're not necessarily out there seeking you out. It's the salespeople who are trying to get you. I had another call this week of someone who basically said, I'm looking for guaranteed income. Could you, like, if that person found an insurance salesperson, like, all their money would be in that thing because they've been given the tools to sell to them. It's like, all right, cool. Here's what I'm going to give you without evaluating what that means. So it is hard. Like, to your what you should do when you start working, I think there are good things that have been implemented in this country where a lot of people are defaulted now into exactly what you described. You'll be defaulted into a 401k contribution rate that will increase 1% until it hits this percentage, which is really cool unless you actively change it.
I mean, it's like bumper rails on a bowling alley. Like that's what we're trying to do. Is the people that are really educating themselves don't need the help And the people that aren't asking for the help need as much default guidance as possible. And yeah, trying to legislate that, legislation's a blunt tool. It just is. There are people, I am certain, because we've gotten this question before, of how much better would we have done if we had privatized Social Security, and instead of paying into this government system that's broken, I had just gotten to invest my own money because I didn't need the help. And at the same time, I can look at that and both agree, and then on the flip side, go, do you know how many homeless elderly people we would have if we didn't have Social Security? Because for a shocking percentage of Americans, that's all they have. That's their only retirement system.
Yeah. Have you done the math? I wonder what those numbers look like on like required returns. It would scale because obviously it's skewed towards lower income, but I've never done that. It's just a out loud thought I had as you were talking.
Yeah, no, I've never done the math on what you would have to put in, but I'm sure it's a beatable number. I mean, there's no way it's not.
Right. Yeah.
Well, except that the system's running out of money.
That was going to be my point.
I know. Yeah, but most of it is not a return, right? It's a flow.
Right.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, you can calculate what you've put in, but really what all you're doing is supporting the current recipients of the program.
Yeah.
So hopefully somebody still wants to work when we get there, Dan.
For sure. The other risk there is you can say that till you're blue in the face that like we should privatize this program, or I don't want the government kind of in charge of this. I would bet most people don't save that money. Like that's the second half of it is you then need to do the thing that you said you were going to do. And most people will not do that.
Well, that's it. Because it comes back to exactly where this show started, which is how do you get people onto a path that is reasonable and make sure that they do it before it's too late? And we need some semblance of making it easy to talk about, making it easy for people to get access to the right advice, and just to get started so that they don't ask the question for the first time in their 60s and not have done anything at that point. And there's part of me, the part of me that's I think there's an American trait, honestly, that is you're going to let some people fall on their face if they choose it. Like that's just part of what we do as a country. But the other part of me that is like terrified for folks that haven't done anything and is heartbroken when I get questions from people that are not in a good place and truly behind because they should have started 40 years ago. It just makes me want to share this advice. And that's really, I think, partially why we're talking about this today is how do you create the conversation, whether you're having it with someone or whether you need to send them to a show like ours or whatever that resource is. But people need to feel like this stuff is approachable. It needs to be okay to not know. It needs to be okay to be at square one going, tell me how it works.
So if you were to send someone, let's say like a kid, to start thinking about money, and I'm putting you on the spot, like someone between 10 and 15, and you're like, all right, let's introduce this kid into the world of finance. And there are going to be some limitations as to what you can expose them to because they're a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anywhere your mind would go to for someone around that age?
So my idea has always been to start with a natural interest. So if your kid's into movies, start with Disney. If your kid's into cars, start with whatever car they think is the coolest. And then talk about the process and back out all the way to the investor and that you could be a part owner of that company. And because to me, that's really what it is. That's why business is so interesting, is that it's personal. It's people, it's a product, it's a thing that they want. It's why is this car more expensive than that car? What makes it cool? What makes you attracted to it? To me, I would start there because you've got something to latch onto, and then you can kind of keep zooming back out to then it's like, well, yeah, okay, you're into Lamborghini. Well, it turns out that Volkswagen owns Lamborghini, and then it turns out that you could invest into Volkswagen, but you're investing in all these other things, and then it turns out that maybe that's not the only car maker that's going to make money, so maybe we just diversify and buy a few of them. And then, well, maybe we don't only want to buy cars, so we're going to buy an index fund instead, right? Like I would start at the smallest point that I can get some traction and then talk about the people that make the thing and how that came to be, and then zoom it all the way back out.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's effective. If somebody's had that conversation with their kids, I would love to know if that has worked. I've given that advice because I do think, I think directionally starting where they're interested is the most important piece of that. Like, it doesn't matter what the thing is, but that's where I would start.
Yeah, and well, that's my personal story too. So I can speak to that being an effective way to go about it because my grandmother bought me shares of Coca-Cola, not endorsement of the stock or a recommendation to go buy it, but when I was 7 years old, I think, or 8 years old. Very tangible brand. And one day when I was in Atlanta, we got to go to the Coca-Cola factory and see it. And I felt like this pride of ownership because I'd understood what it meant to be a shareholder of something like that. And it wasn't life-changing money. It was just all for the lesson. The other thing that I'm not sure is repeatable these days, but every day we got the newspaper and I would go to the business section and look for it to see how Coca-Cola was doing. So I was fully engaged the way someone might be engaged with like a fantasy sports team with my stock. And I think at that age, something that people can like touch, see, and feel and engage with is exactly how you would get them started. I mean, the other thing that came, were you going to add on to that?
Well, I was having just a real time thought of gamifying it.
Yeah.
And, I tell people to do this with their portfolios of put them all in Post-it notes and rank order your favorite stock picks and see if your biggest stocks are actually, or see if your favorite or highest conviction stocks are actually your biggest holdings. I think that's an interesting exercise.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could do the same thing with kids, and you could put 3 or 4 companies on a Post-it and say, well, which one do you like? Which one do you think is going to do well? And then track it. Yeah, I mean, you could easily do that and either create literally a paper like Post-it note stock chart or whiteboard or whatever mechanism. I'm sure there's some cool tech thing to do this, but I would use anything other than a spreadsheet because that's the most boring implementation.
Right. And I think it's great if you actually buy the thing, but you don't even need to do that. It can be all for fun and games and learning.
Yeah. I mean, you can put a handful of stock tickers and the current price and track it that way. I mean, yeah, it can be that simple. So yeah, if I were trying to get a kid involved, that to me is what I would do, is try and relate it back to something they're already excited about.
The other thought I had was we were talking about saving and investing and how those are the same or different. My mind went to Monopoly, which is always a great way to lead to family fights. But thinking about using Monopoly as an analogy for saving or investing, right? Saving is all the cash that you've coming in, sitting on the side, hoarding money, right? Investing is buying the properties, buying the houses and hotels on the place to generate additional income for yourself. And I assume people still play Monopoly, but I think just framing it in something that people can relate to like that is interesting. So when you think about buying stocks, it's like buying the properties, buying the houses and hotels.
How we end up with all these landlords, Dan. Yeah, this is everybody playing Monopoly just wants to buy houses and rent them out. That's how we
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Anyway, I hope this discussion has been helpful. We're trying to broaden the topic to folks that maybe aren't on the show every day. And we want to make sure that our show is as welcoming as possible. And whether those questions start from square one or the most technical stuff that we can get into on a daily basis, we want to be a place where people feel comfortable asking us those things. Check Your Balances at outlook.com is where you find us. We're also on Instagram at Check Your Balances and on YouTube, where people continue to comment that they think our voices are backwards.
Maybe they are. Did I tell my Bill and Ted story on the show before?
I don't recall.
I think this is the single dumbest thing I've ever done in my life, or the single dumbest thought I've ever had in my life.
What a nugget that we can save for the very end of the show. Anybody that made it to the end.
Yeah, here's your payoff. Alex Winter, Keanu Reeves, Bill and Ted. For some reason, I confused the two of them. I thought they were the other. And later, I was like looking at pictures of who I now know as Keanu Reeves. I'm like, that's so weird that like he looks exactly like Alex Winter did. I mean, like I was a kid when I was watching Bill and Ted, but I thought they were reversed to the point where I was so committed to that I saw them like not in the movies. I'm like, that's just so strange. Like I thought this was Alex Winter. Why does he look exactly like like the other dude.
So your logical end to that was he just must look a lot like that other guy.
Yeah, he's morphed into the other guy over time.
Not that I've got these two people wrong.
No, I refuse to accept that. That's my, I think, dumbest
I
thought.
think people are having that experience when they see us on YouTube.
Well, you were having my Bill and Ted moment then.
We are Bill and Ted. All right. Let's call it a wrap for the week. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We hope you'll join us again next time.